This episode is about minutes 131 through 135 of The Rise of Skywalker with returning guest Frank Lehman.
Hi.
Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, feel free to call me Xanthi, and today we're talking about minutes 131 through 135 of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. This is the final scene of the film, an entire 9-episode Skywalker Saga, in which Rey visits the old Lars homestead, buries Luke and Leia's lightsabers in the sand, and calls herself Rey Skywalker for the first time. And then we watch the twin suns rise and cut to the end credits. I'm super pleased to welcome back to the show music theorist, film musicologist, and creator of the Star Wars thematic catalog, Dr. Frank Lehman. Hi, Frank.
Hi. It's a pleasure as always to be here, and I'm really excited about this segment.
I'm so thrilled to be talking to you today, especially toward the end of my coverage of the movie. I've had you for, like, Last Jedi, it was also toward the end, and then for a couple other ones, it was like more toward the beginning. So this is a good excuse to talk about the film as a whole. And also, as of the time we're recording this, it's been 5 years since The Rise of Skywalker came out.
That's right. Is it like close to the date? I feel as though it is.
It was on the 19th was the wide release. But on this very day, 5 years ago, December 16th, The Rise of Skywalker got its LA premiere.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So we're marking the anniversary here. Excellent.
Yeah, and the time really flew.
Yeah. Well, a lot has happened since then.
That's very true.
In the world and in the world of Star Wars music.
So much. I mean, I guess before we dive into the minutes, I'm curious what, if anything, has changed about your opinion of this movie and score?
Yeah. Well, since it came out, I mean, I guess I've had quite a long time to let it simmer, and sink in. And I've also taught now a couple times my music of John Williams' Star Wars class, which includes all 9 movies and then some. And I've been able to watch my own opinion change. It's an interesting experience to be teaching and sort of noticing as you're talking through something how some of your opinions come out despite yourself.
Totally.
And I don't know. I think the last time I taught it, I still kind of I had a bit of a cringe for the last line. I don't know that I'm fully accepting Rey Skywalker, but I've also sat with like John Williams' own words about this film score and what it meant to him, and thought I suppose I have a bit of a revised opinion, more towards the movie. I mean, I've always been a huge, maybe unseemly partisan for the score. I think it was massively underrated. And
I think it was underrated too.
Yeah, and maybe the movie as well. I still kind of feel as though Last Jedi is definitely for me at least, the artistic and sort of aesthetic, philosophical apex of the sequel trilogy. But there's a lot to like in Rise of Skywalker, and I think now 5 years later, I concentrate on the saving what I love rather than attacking what I hate. To paraphrase Rose. It's just it's silly to me to be hung up on some of still admittedly questionable or unsatisfying narrative choices that they made in the movie because I mean it is there. It is there for us to accept at this stage, and like I said, there's really a lot of good, musically especially, in this film.
Yeah, I think between Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi is my favorite of the films, but I prefer the Rise of Skywalker score to The Last Jedi.
I actually kind of agree, and I almost feel this may be a little bit controversial, but I think this sequel trilogy peaks musically with the last entry. There's great stuff happening in episode 7 and 8, don't get me wrong, but it feels as though Williams finally is just firing on all cylinders here with this one. And a lot of the critiques that I heard come up about aspects of originality or nostalgia, weaponized nostalgia, like to to use Dan Golding's phrase.
Yeah.
It's certainly there, right? This is not a score that reinvents the wheel. It's much more, I don't know, it's a soundtrack about Star Wars, right? It's the most self-reflexive of all 9, I think. And where I thought that The Force Awakens, fantastic score, it still felt a little tentative and lean and restrained in some ways. And The Last Jedi, I think, represents both the best and the worst aspects of these sequels, musically speaking. But with a few exceptions, I really don't feel as though there's that much to take issue with Episode 9's score. I think it's fantastic and very gratifying to listen to in the form that we have, which is maybe something that we can talk about a little bit over the course of our conversation, certainly. Because as you probably know better than anyone else now, having gone through this score and soundtrack meticulously, like what we hear is, I don't know what percentage I'm willing to claim, but it's definitely not mostly John Williams' original intent, right? This is, as a text, a very fraught object and determining like what's supposed to go where and whether this is Williams' choice or J.J. Abrams or who else. It's very anarchic, I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious what you heard of John Williams' interviews, that like what he has said about this score that stuck with you.
Well, he has such a positive attitude towards it. He really seems, there's the Maestro's finale. I think that's one of the special features. Yeah, would have been called the DVD extra back in the days when those things were still physical media. He talks with a great deal of fondness of this project and, relishing the ability or the opportunity to rescore or to score again Lando and to play around with Rey's theme and to revisit the Emperor's theme. And it seems as though it was, at least in the way that he speaks, which admittedly is always very prepared, and he doesn't tend to say controversial or negative things in his official statements. It seems pretty genuine to me. I suspect that, maybe more than suspect, I kind of know that he was not altogether pleased with the way that the score was treated in the final cut of the film upon hearing it, which is similar to his reaction to Episode 7 and 8. It's a shame. It hurts to think that he felt somewhat unsatisfied with the treatment of his music, but there's also, of course, the afterlife that these scores enjoy in various, the soundtrack albums, both FYC, you probably talked about that, the For Your Consideration album, and the official one that he had hand in curating, and then the concert arrangements, and I don't know that he's necessarily performed himself live in any concerts material from this movie, which is a real shame.
Have you heard any of it live?
I haven't. Oh, no, that's not true. That's not true. I went to the whatever the title was. The Keith Lockhart and the Boston Pops did the Star Wars sort of symphonic experience with a narrator.
The Star Wars in concert?
Yeah, and that's been kind of on tour in some form or another.
Yeah, I just saw it at the LA Phil a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think
with Anthony
it's the
Daniels?
same. Yeah. It's more or less the same.
And that was very interesting.
I
thought that was very interesting how they handled the sequel trilogy in that.
Yeah. This sort of compressed to, an hour and a half's worth of material just into the Rey and Ben finale sequence. And
then played straight up cues.
I know. And it's also the only time. So there's this signature edition of the Rise of Skywalker, which I think has 4 selections. Rise of Skywalker, which is the one that's represented on the disc, the sort of a hybrid piece with both the friendship and I'm forgetting my own label for it.
Victory?
Friendship and victory theme. Yep, that's the one. And then he did a treatment of the Anthem of Evil, which I think is actually called more fittingly, from my perspective, the Psalm of the Sith. It was a proper expanded concert arrangement. I've never heard that played, but I've seen it. I kind of know what the structure from just the sheet music is. And then there's the speeder chase, which is like considerably enlarged and turned into a real.
Right,
and that was heard. Yeah, you can you can either barely hear it or simply not hear it, since there's so little of it that was actually retained in the. Don't get me started on that one.
Yeah.
But like the concert arrangement is great, and like there's this real substantial middle section, and it's kind of like a redemption of the cue that was essentially scrapped, like just really neglected in the film. And
So is this available as a score?
Yeah, I think
okay.
you can get off of halleonard.com.
Okay.
The version I saw was at the BSO archives, so that's what I think they used. Well, I don't know actually whether they used that or the actual score sheets, because there were some from the sequels, some things that were not part of concert arrangements, like the Captain Phasma fight, for example, in the concert that I heard. That was pretty impressive. Nice little chance for the percussion to shine for a few bars. Right?
Yeah. Where we were sitting, we were like right above, like behind the first violins above. Like we could just see who was playing every single thing. And man, it was amazing to watch percussionists just like running around, just so.
Oh my God!
And just to see like with my own eyes the interesting doublings that he does all the time, like xylophone doubled with like there's a part where it's like two xylophones and then it's like. Oh, very interesting instrument pairings.
It's wild. It really is. I cannot endorse enough the incorporation and promotion of this music in concert venues. This is kind of like my big thing. The one of the main theses of the book that I'm still in the process of writing, but nearly finished. That this music, almost to a note, like sustains and rewards independent listening, or maybe listening with some kind of montage or whatever that tend to occur in some of these concert treatments. But Rise of Skywalker is as much true as it is for like Empire Strikes Back, in my opinion. Like this is just great music. Full stop.
That's a big statement.
Oh yeah, yep. And I spend many words trying to make a case for it, but
I'm very excited.
I think ultimately, the music speaks for itself, right? That's what's making the argument, and I'm just there to kind of be a mouthpiece for it.
Right. In my like I write music criticism sometimes, and earlier this year I went to the LA Phil's been doing this John Williams spotlight and lots of concerts related to John Williams. And so the first one was that I went to was A Century of Film Music. And it was this program that John Williams curated that had, Korngold, Rosha, like lots of, and I remember, first of all, they heavily promote it as John Williams Spotlight. And there was only one or two Williams pieces on there. And I'm sure he didn't even want to program himself. I'm sure they forced him to. But I just couldn't help but think, I wish more of his music was the standout, even amongst these other things. They did Close Encounters of the Third Kind Suite, and it was just like a revelation where it came in, on the program when it came in, and I was just like, I wish they played more of his music in the concert hall, because you can get it at the bowls, but only the biggest hits, and it was just
I kind of agree. I mean, and I say this as someone with absolute infatuation with Korngold and Rosa and all the other Golden Age and classic Hollywood composers that I think were on that program.
Yeah.
It was not I'll say this about this, and maybe you also had a similar thought, that it was not exactly a canon challenging kind of program. It was very much, these are established composers and established hits. But at the same time, I think that this is still doing an important job, which is legitimizing this genre in the concert hall in the first place, right? In a way, you kind of have to lean on those safe choices, because maybe they're not as common as they used to be, but the classical elite crowd that would be scandalized to hear Close Encounters of the Third Kind in the concert hall. It helps to have people like Rosa and Korngold and Steiner. Well, not so much Steiner. I don't think he didn't have a foot in the classical world.
He wasn't on the program.
Oh, he wasn't. Well, maybe that was part of the rationale there. Yeah.
Herman, Alex North.
Herman, of course.
Spartacus, then Alfred Newman. Mm-hmm. Lawrence of Arabia, Captain Blood. That was an interesting pick. He picked Captain Blood, and then Danny Elfman, Batman, Morricone, Thomas Newman. Anyway.
Tommy.
Yes. And of course,
got his
David
start.
Newman conducted.
Of course, David Newman. Yeah, it's a family affair.
Yep. Anyway, let's get started listening to these minutes, which very conveniently gives us the beginning of the whole cue.
Perfect.
Now it's fading out.
There's been no one for so long. Who are you?
I'm Ray.
I figured you might as well listen to the whole cue. It's so short. There's like both. So it's so simple, but there's so much that one could analyze in that.
Yeah, it's a remarkably austere little cue. But in a way, the simplicity allows it to be this super pregnant, like open text, right? You can read a huge amount into it and glean a great deal of resonance, not only with the Rise of Skywalker score itself, but everything that preceded. So it is really a strategic choice, I think, on Williams' part to do this stripped down, spare little cue, which, I mean, it's not devoid of motivic connections. Actually, I think it's supercharged with them.
Oh, yeah.
But the dominant, the most salient aspect is that minor sort of a triad outlining figure.
Right.
Yeah. Which, how many notes is it? 6 notes? Even there, we can probably talk about that.
Yeah. I mean,
that sextet of pitches for a good 20 minutes. How
it could be like scrambled force theme.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think this is just stuffed with potential cross relations, I guess, with previous material. It's the first thing that comes to mind, maybe yours as well, is this is one of those rhymes, right? And I don't know if you have strong opinions about the George Lucas rhyme conceit. I am very fond of it.
The ring theory?
I think it got such a...
Or just the ring...
not...
Okay, just rhyming in general. Yeah, it's like poetry.
Just rhyming in general, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that little quote of his gets a really unfair rap because of that era of kind of online hating on the prequels Star Wars discourse that stemmed from, I don't know, 2010 or so, which is I think in large part why the sequel trilogy goes out of its way to repress any allusions to those three movies or scores. But this still does it, I think, and maybe I'll make a case for that a little bit later on.
Okay.
But I feel as though the primary rhyme here is with the opening, not of the cue, but of the relevant section or module within Binary Sunset, the way that before the Force theme is initiated, when Luke, of course, goes out and looks over the horizon, there's 2 measures, I think, worth of this triad, not exactly triad, but a figure that charts G minor. And it's a comparable, not exactly the same orchestration. That's more windy, and this is just celeste and harp, I think. But it's achieving a similar end. And then there's that itself was then recalled and developed and rhymed with on many subsequent occasions, including Return of the Jedi, and then not all of them, in Revenge of the Sith towards the end of that movie. And then it becomes worked into the kind of Star Wars default soundscape, I think, in the sequel trilogy, because it sounds to me very similar with the music that at the end of Last Jedi.
I was just thinking it sounds like Luke's last stand.
Well, that's
okay.
absolutely
No, you're thinking
right.
of something different.
I wasn't thinking different. Yeah, no, but that's true. I was thinking a bit later, not so much melodically, but timbrally, with the music when the stable
kid.
children
Yeah,
are. You have the, I think it's celeste and harp. That part, almost like a music box, very repetitive.
Yeah.
A kind of musical topic that you don't hear very often in Star Wars, quite honestly. I mean, I think the major instance is, the material that precedes the Force theme on a couple key occasions. Maybe the, there's celeste music elsewhere, but nothing quite that music box-like aspect. And then it gets, this is sort of the logical extreme version of that, where it just rotates through that 6-note arpeggio. I think, how many times do I have it down? 24 iterations. So 24 out of the 26 measures of this cue have some presentation of ya-da-da, da-da-da, ya-da-da, right? Over and over and over.
Yeah. And you're including, like, when the notes change a little bit.
Oh, yeah. So it's not fixed.
Yeah.
So about halfway through it goes from D minor to E flat minor, which is itself, I think, a fairly pregnant key relationship.
Yes, yes. Evokes many things.
Yeah. And there's also the big timbral swell that occurs within the cue. And there's a melodic line as well that
right, the chime.
Triad outlining thing is kind of the background for most of the cue. But it is what begins it and ends it, and could foreseeably have gone on forever. It's it's endless music.
Yeah. So I guess, a cynical, one part of me could go, it's just outlining a minor triad, and it's then modulating because it has to do something. Mm-hmm. That's the mystery themed, that's just
oh yeah, that's
the most basic. Luke in Exile does that. Just the most basic kind of music that could be written here.
Well,
that's one part of me.
It's not wrong to have that feeling, but can you imagine an alternate approach to the scene that was more florid or complex? I think it would have failed. And this raises, this is going to be my answer to the question, what do you wish you knew about this Star Wars music? But this cue is called 9M5 Alt. It's an alternate. So at some point, there was another draft. Maybe it was exactly the same, but for a slight change of instrumentation. We don't know. Rise of Skywalker is uniquely frustrating in that respect, that we know the least about the overall body of music that Williams wrote for it, including revisions and alternate takes, and the film underwent all kinds of changes right up until the last moment. So I'm not sure when in the scoring process he would have approached this cue, whether it was the last thing he wrote or it was early on, or he wrote it early on and then had to redo it. Who knows? Because there were rewrites and reshoots and ADR happening right up until the last minute. But all that said, the possibility that there was some other more elaborate, a cue for which someone could cynically not object to its complexity, right? We don't know. But I think that this fits the scene like a glove. Is maybe my favorite cue from the score.
Oh, interesting.
I think it's just perfect, yeah. And it's because it is so quiet and simple, or seemingly simple. Simple, but not simplistic. That's the way I'd phrase it. It has a kind of learned simplicity that actually takes quite a lot of restraint and, musical, emotional intelligence to know how to write. You know what I mean?
Agreed. So my own counterpoint would be to my own accusation is, well, first of all, somehow I feel like John Williams manages to make arpeggios interesting constantly. Whether it's in the inversion or just the order of the notes, like here, it's certainly not like, or something like that. It's, which is a very, it has so much more of a signature, I think.
Yeah.
And it more readily, makes it easier to connect to Ray's theme and the Force theme, I think.
Well, that's just scratching the surface. So the melodic, or at least for me, I mean, because this is such basic musical matter. It's easy to read in a lot of different, say, motivic reverberations with other pieces. So the Force theme is there. I hadn't thought of Luke's Last Stand, but now that I think of it, yes, obviously, repeated minor triad. That's
and it does the submediant. It does the minor sixth thing.
Well, and that's where I hear the strongest connection. Although most of these iterations, not all of them, but almost all of them are just 1, 3, 5, and some configuration of the tonic triad. There's one or two towards the swelling moment where you get the submediant pitch. And that to me just activates something that was latent in the arpeggio already, which is there's a kind of encoding of Darth Vader's melodic, or the Imperial March's melodic contour. Anytime you hear a sixth or a fifth, but a chromatic fifth, rising and then going down a minor third, that contour, ya-da-da, ya-da-da, towards the end of a phrase, I think it's impossible after 9 movies, or 8, because A New Hope didn't have the Imperial March. But after that point, after the main theme and maybe the Force theme, the most iconic and inescapable melody in the series, I think it's impossible not to hear some kind of echo with the Imperial March here. Ya-da-da, da-da-da, ya-da-da, dum, da-da. I mean, add a little dotted aspect to that, and perhaps change the harmony and the penultimate measure to or penultimate beat to the flat submediant, and you got Darth Vader's theme, right? It's right there.
That's so true.
So it doesn't beat you over the head with it in a way that some other Vader-esque materials in the rest of the saga do. In a way, I think that Luke's Last Stand material sounds a little bit more March-like and maybe suggestive of the Imperial March more strongly. Same with Jedi Steps, like the concluding harmonic progression, and that is the Vader progression. And there's plenty of that stuff happening in the prequels too. I mean, for very obvious reasons. Here, I don't think that it's meant to make some grand, explicit narrative point, but rather to just conjure up this musical memory and show in a way that this is a synthesis. This cue, more than any others, I think, really is about more than completing the score to The Rise of Skywalker, but the sequel trilogy and actually the whole 9-movie-long cycle. This is music that is attempting to convey some aspect of wholeness, or sort of mythic unity, but also unendingness,
Right.
or the potential for constant retelling. And I'm very enthusiastic about talking about this because this is the afterword of the book. I'm talking
cool.
specifically about how the many, dozens of times that Williams has been asked or provided some kind of ending to a Star Wars film. And this is so poetic. I call this the poetic ending as opposed to, the narrative ending, which I think is after Rey defeats Palpatine and Kylo Ren / Ben is redeemed, and we have the sort of victorious music at the end of the Battle of Exegol. That's dealing with the pure plot, the need for musical resolution in terms of what's happening in the plot. And there's also the sort of leitmotivic bows, however you like the previous cue, which you must have looked at.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that too.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm just
It's a great title for a cue because either way you pronounce it, it's fitting. But that's kind of more of a leitmotivic, summation in the way that you might find in, a leitmotivic opera or a cyclic symphony where you revisit a great amount of the themes and sort of say your goodbyes to them at that stage. And of course, there's also aspects of formal closure with the end credits and the Force theme and all that. But this to me is Williams really saying goodbye to the idea of Star Wars as a kind of mythic, poetic text, and that's why I think this is unusually effective as a cue, despite its simplicity, because it's got a big job to fill.
Yeah, and speaking of the different kinds of the narrative ending and the poetic ending, I mean, I know that your book is the Skywalker Symphonies, and your, symphonic, the symphony. Okay, I'm going to ask you more questions about the symphonic nature of this later, but I guess I just want to say that this is the coda of a big symphony, and
right, it's what happens after the ending, and that's what's so fascinating to me, because Williams is, over the course of 41 years, he's writing ending after ending after ending. Back with A New Hope, for all intents and purposes, he and everyone else involved thought that this was going to be a one-off. I don't know. Was it titled Episode 4 when it premiered, or was it just Star Wars?
It was
just a lot of retconning, going on about what the intent of that movie was, and even that has multiple stages of its ending. There's the like I said, the narrative ending or the plot ending with the Battle of Yavin and the explosion of the Death Star and the happy little augmented rebel fanfare that occurs after that. And then there's the more formal ending to the diegesis with the throne room music and the Force theme and all. Have their happy little Walton-esque processional.
Yes,
and then,
yes.
And the end credits. But there's also endings that are provided the concert arrangements, where there's an opportunity to kind of revisit and reclose or give an alternative perspective on what has come before.
And you mean in the end credits?
In the end credits or
I guess in the...
refitted it into the Star Wars main theme concert piece, which is kind of like the beginning and the ending of the movie, all the framing material. And then he does it again a couple times in Return of the Jedi. And then he does it again a couple times with Revenge of the Sith. And more times with all three of the sequels, since I think, unlike the previous entries, it was always kind of a question whether he would return. Maybe it wasn't that much of a question, but he claims to have received all the justification or motivation that he needed because he wanted to continue scoring Daisy Ridley. But maybe there's some arm twisting going on, or maybe not. Maybe this is all self-deprecation. But in any case, the man has constantly been asked to revisit and reconclude something that had already ended, which is kind of the interesting challenge and opportunity and problem for Star Wars in general, right? What do you do after the Rebel Alliance wins in A New Hope. Well, there's more to the story because it was only a partial victory. What do you do after Return of the Jedi when it seems like this is a conclusive victory? Well, I mean, it was until The Force Awakens came out and kind of told us or showed us that not everything was so peachy after the destruction of the second Death Star. So for some, that might be a frustration, right? Can't we have closure? Can't we have happy endings? But there's actually something, I think, more interesting going on with this idea of cyclicality and unendingness. And that's, I mean, we have that in spades with the music.
Yeah, and I think Rey's theme in general also espouses that concept more so than the other hero themes that we've had in the past.
It ends quietly, right? It has this wonderful arc where it starts out kind of tentative in the. I'm thinking of the concert arrangement here, but maybe the theme, just as a melody, does this as well. And it has this nice actualization, midway through. But then it really does recede with this, repetitive, quasi-ostinato figure that could go on forever and ever and ever. It's unfinished, right? This is music that the story, we can impose closure on it, but it opens itself up to multiple different ways of like thinking what a conclusion can be. And Williams himself does that, because he has the main concert arrangement of Rey's theme, which you hear on the album and in the signature edition, but then he went and rewrote it for Anna Sophie Mutter and has a completely different ending. Absolutely an emotional and formal 180 because it ends loudly and very frighteningly, almost in the Anna Sophie Mutter version. I
need them to release the music for that.
Oh my gosh!
So that other violinists can play it too.
That's a whole other kettle of fish, and I barely have time to talk about all the Anna Sophie Mutter versions. I stick to just the Anakin's theme version because anything more and it's a bottomless and fascinating but kind of peripheral musical supplement to the main Star Wars corpus.
Yeah. Well, it's virtuoso stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to play this cue again, but this time we can stop during it. So these are the D minor. You have the cello come in. This is Rey's theme, B phrase. Basically.
Right? It's kind of transformed.
Yeah.
So that,
kind of, but not completely.
Right. So it has the characteristic duplet. And it's interesting. Prior to Rise of Skywalker, I think we only hear the B phrase once or twice, both in The Force Awakens. It goes underground for Last Jedi, but it's more prominent in the score for Rise of Skywalker, and you hear some really lovely variations on it. And I think this is it's not overt, but it is her theme, but it's transformed, right? The actual opening to it doesn't have it's held back in a way. And Williams talked about how he relished the chance to kind of grow up Rey's theme in this movie. And I think this is probably the most concerted place where that happens, because it really isn't. If you're not, unless you're paying attention and really know your leitmotif inventory, right, it's not all that obvious that this is derived from her theme, because again, there's other things that it could also kind of sounds like. Yeah. But it's interesting, right?
But then if we're building a case for that, I think also hearing chimes and also just seeing her on screen, we're also building...
It's certainly reinforced by like you said, the chimes motif, which is, that's undisguised. It is reharmonized ever so slightly.
Oh, is it?
Right. Yeah, it's parallel triads rather than this kind of triad to sus, back to triad figure. So a
we're
little
about to get to that.
fuller.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's one of very, very few reharmonizations of that chimes motif. I
chimes.
think the only other one that comes to mind is at the last measure of the last portion of the Last Jedi end credits, where there's I think it goes from 1 to minor subtonic back to the tonic.
Oh, yeah, it does something weird there.
Yeah, it's this kind of chromatic. Here it's not chromatic, but it is slightly more, I don't say lush. It's not lush at all. This is very very austere.
It's like outlined a little bit
down.
more.
Yeah.
Colors a little more.
And that occurs when she's, I think, sliding down. So I mean that's
Just like in The Force
obvious
Awakens.
clawback. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's grown up. Right? It's a little bit more.
No, I agree.
There's more meat to it. Yeah.
I mean, I actually do. I like that she does that again. The rhyming of it.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like it reminds me as an audience member how much she's gone through since that first time we see her do that.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember back when this movie came out and temperatures were hot and we were all having hot takes that there was a sense that maybe this scene was problematic because it represented a regression for her, a childhood reversion back to the helpless, sad, lonely scavenger girl. I actually don't think that's happening at all. To me, I have the same sense that this is a recollection of the past so that we can see or hear just how much has occurred in the interim and that this is not the same person as was before. It's a nice kind of bookending technique rather than an indication that she's lapsing back into childhood.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'll keep playing. She's looking over the homestead. She's looking into the spot where the kitchen used to be. Strings join. So the strings enter, but then the strings come in an octave higher. That's when she starts wrapping up the two lightsabers. So it's like,
and this is where I feel the cue really starts cooking. In its still rather understated way. That the melody, it's interesting to me that it should occur in the cellos, and it's not especially hummable, but it is the main melodic line. And to me, some of the intervals there, particularly towards the end, where we have these downwards fifths, sounds in a similar vein to the Jedi Steps main melody. Maybe not a reference, but at least some kind of echo of the kind of writing Williams turns to when there's this vague, ill-defined kind of mythic importance that doesn't necessarily require an outright statement of the Force theme. I mean, that's soon to come anyway. But yeah, there are other moments in this score that they're near but not exact Jedi Steps callbacks.
No, that's a good reference. I feel maybe let's listen to Jedi Steps a little bit. Just big leaps.
Yeah.
Really big ones.
That's the Last Jedi version?
Yeah, it is. Yep. Should I play from the Rise of
Skywalker
Skywalker version?
That was the relevant part. The downwards sevenths and fourths and fifths. That's present in this kind of transformed variant of Rey's beef phrase of her theme too.
Yeah,
it's like I said. I mean, this thing is just overflowing with possible cross-references, and we haven't even gotten to my favorites yet, but that will come soon.
We will get there. Okay. I just regressed a little bit. Okay. I regressed even more. Okay, here we go.
Oh, there we go.
Oh no, I have to go back. We have to get into it.
Yeah, the moment of modulation is all important.
Yes. Also, I'll note that like when Rey starts to wrap up the lightsabers, we get a harp glissando, makes the whole thing feel more significant, more magical.
Mm-hmm.
And then listen for another harp glissando when we modulate. She's burying the lightsabers. And a little inversion.
Yes. So I've made a big deal in previous things that I've written about the feeling of chills and how musically that can be accomplished. And to me, that swell, particularly the second segment of the big tootie, for whatever it's worth. I don't think that trumpets and tubas and trombones are really maybe the trombones. I don't know. But you know, the crest of this cue, basically the high point, feels really custom built to evoke that sensation of goose flesh and frisson, or however you want. Yeah, exactly. And it's the most dissonant portion of the cue. Again, not especially chromatic or anything, but it's the one moment where we have a minor second clash, I think, between I want to say B flat and C flat, the sort of E flat minor
talking about
flat 6 chord. Yeah. They occur simultaneously. And it's a moment of heightened relevance, heightened emotionality in the music, and has been achieved through a kind of build-up, right? That's not to be too like mechanical about it, but that's, I think, how, if I were a film composer, I would achieve this moment of, this is something really sublime or important happening, and maybe, under the right circumstances. It's very easy for me. Like I can induce chills in myself just by thinking about certain pieces of music, this one included. But this is the moment I think that's what he's going for. And it accompanies this shot of the lightsabers, Luke and Leia's, apparently, the twins' lightsabers being sunken into the ground, and it's really significant as an image, but also as a sonic image, right? So it doesn't. It seems really fitting that this is the moment that we get this crescendo and key change, and the key change is salient too because we're going from D minor to E flat minor, which is the big key change that occurs at the climax of Rey's theme, the concert arrangement, and in a couple other places, right? It's not just that relationship, but those particular absolute keys. And I'm not usually one to like make a big deal about what specific key we're in Star Wars. I don't think Williams really cares that much, but every now and then I think that this is too on the nose to be anything other than intentional. And the fact is, we get this kind of stepwise upwards modulation with Rey's theme elsewhere, like even back in the previous cue, where there's a transition from, I think, A minor to B flat minor when her theme is broached and then leads into Luke and Leia. It's the same relationship, and that also comes from her concert arrangement too.
Although interestingly, in the film, it doesn't do that. It skips that part. It skips the modulation. So the whole film is a half step down.
Oh my God. Yeah, and it cuts out parts of
Yoda's theme
and Yoda's theme. Yeah. Well, it's such a weird cue that, I mean, I don't know if that's to
but
the
it's almost
detriment
that. It's like that on the soundtrack.
It's like that on the soundtrack. Exactly. So these kinds of intensificatory stepwise modulations, and particularly one from D to the very non-gratifying key for, I think, most orchestral instruments of the E flat minor. It's an interesting and poignant and important choice, I feel.
I agree. There's something about, I have to note that when the sand is like being all sound designy, it's very it's a very pleasing sand sound. The orchestration feels like it's augmenting what's happening with the sand there. So it's like a very, I don't know, it's like shimmery almost.
Yeah. This is one of, I think, many examples in the score when I'm not being really down on how grossly they mangled Williams's music. I actually think that the relationship of the music track and the sound effects track and Foley and sound design across the movie is really great.
Yeah, I think so too.
And this is a nice example where those two things are really complementing each other strongly.
Yeah.
And do you feel there's almost like a dance-like quality to this one stage, and for me, it's probably because of the bass line. I don't know if it's pizzicato. I don't have the score. I make a plug for this. The piano folio is actually really good for
nice.
Rise of Skywalker.
I couldn't find that. Is that the easy piano version? Or is it
no? Oh, no, this is the... well,
because all I can find online, like from the library, is the easy piano version.
Yeah, no, this is not so easy. Well, I don't know what an easy version of the Battle of the Resistance cue would look like, but yeah, it's unusually good for as far as piano folios go for Williams scores. Like it's straight up, long underscore cues.
Oh, good. Does it retain the keys?
Yeah, it's all there. I mean, some aspects are missing, when it's getting particularly polyphonic or truly unpianistic, but for the most part, it's a pretty accurate, I think, representation of the score.
Nice.
Yeah, and that well, do we even mention the name of the cue that we're talking about? Because that itself is a point of controversy.
Oh, I don't think so. Why don't you share?
Well, on the soundtrack album and like in the piano books and probably any other popularly accessible version, it's called A New Home. Mm-hmm. Yep. Which is a strange title, but I think the actual
it is a strange title.
Name, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But the actual name that is on the cue sheet, like the slate after the slate number, is just Return to Tatooine,
right?
Which is on its face a very generic, descriptive title. But as I'm trying to make a case, this is really a deep and layered piece. Actually, that title is kind of deep and layered too. How many times have we returned to Tatooine? There's a great line from Harrison Ford in Return of the Jedi where he says, "You're going to die here too," And well, Luke didn't die there, but he does get buried there. And of course, the movies and the TV shows, everyone's always returning to this purported furthest. The star furthest away from the center of the galaxy, right? No, this is actually where one must constantly return. Whereas A New Home, well, for who? Rey, I certainly don't think is moving into this ruined, sand-buried Lars Homestead memory, right? That doesn't really make sense at all.
I guess it's a new home for the lightsabers.
Well, that's true, yeah. So I think that was another thing that annoyed a certain segment of very
fandom.
Opinionated fans. Yeah, the suggestion that Rey needed to sort of just surrender to the Skywalker legacy, and this is now where she lives, and she's just going back to scavengerhood. I don't think that's.
I don't believe
true.
For a second that she's going to stay here.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. But that was a complaint, and I don't know to what degree Williams actually titles the tracks on his soundtrack albums, but I kind of think that this was not his choice, because there is a perfectly apt name for it, which is Return to Tatooine. Yeah.
Yeah.
But who knows? He may have forgotten what it was really about by the point that he was compiling the soundtrack album. So
yeah, true.
But maybe sometimes it's best not to overinterpret those titles, since they can kind of be sometimes a little arbitrary or inaccurate.
Yeah. My favorite is reading the cues and seeing certain misspellings.
Oh gosh,
they're always hilarious.
Well, for a long time he was calling it Darth Vader with an A.
Yeah.
It's funny to see. I think that may be the clearest glimpse into what he actually thinks about the music that he's writing, because some of those cues are like little in-jokes or references to musicians that he worked with in like the 1950s, and cutesy and irreverent, and not especially attentive to actual character names or the deep lore of the Star Wars mythos. No, this is just big important scene, and that was like the Holdo maneuver cue from Last Jedi. It's just called important scene. Yeah, I suppose it is. Or big fights, that could be one of the cues.
Yeah.
Or the ladies say goodbye, which is the Holdo and Leia farewell scene. Yep, the ladies are saying goodbye to each other.
Sure.
It's
That's
cute.
funny. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I want to talk about the major submediant moment.
Yep.
More.
Yep.
So that's the key change.
Here comes that dissonance.
And it only does it once.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I think
Although
that shows a lot of it's either way, it's very restrained. Like sometimes I get
very restrained. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The actual like arpeggiated figuration going to the 6th rather than the 5th degree. That's the only time, and I think that is also the most Vader-esque moment of the figure. And again, it's all diatonic, right? This is stuff that you can get for free in E flat minor. But it's economically goosebumps eliciting for me. It's using very very spare musical palette. The full force, maybe not the entire force, but most of the instruments. A little bit of a timpani roll and cymbal roll, and then it goes back to a relatively spare texture after this crest.
Yeah. Let's continue.
That's it right there. Okay, can we stop it again?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's one last, I think, for me, personally resonant Motivic echo here. And it's one that I can say with almost 100% certainty was not intentional on Williams' part. But if you listen carefully, the way that the horn part comes in for the sort of last musical paragraph after this big swell, da, da. I'll just stop it right there.
Yeah.
That interval and the material that follows it, and the setting, and what this is about, which is a kind of laying to rest topic, and not the key. The key is not what I'm thinking of here. But the last time we buried someone on Tatooine was episode 2, Shmi's Skywalker, right? Exactly. So, so not the right key. That one is an F sharp minor, but whatever. I think this is more kind of intervallic memory that maybe Williams simply associates with this notion of holding back a kind of bittersweet, or well, in that case, more just bitter feeling, but with a poignancy. The kind of music that you get in. This big, weepy minor 6th upwards and then descending down by semitone. It's the same, basically the same instrumentation, same interval, wrong key, wrong follow through. And like I said, Williams isn't thinking of this. He doesn't remember how he scored Shmi Skywalker's funeral with a one-off motif. Back there, so it's purely personal, right? This is something that I bring to this cue, and maybe it's motivated because, well, I kind of want there to be a musical recognition of the prequels and the character whose miraculous birth of Anakin Skywalker set this whole thing in motion, right? It really breathes a nice kind of symmetry to this scene.
I actually have Shmi's funeral queued up now.
Oh, yeah. Let's hear
to
it.
listen to.
See what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's hard to not hear after you've kind of, how do I say, primed yourself for it.
Yes.
But again,
Not intentional, probably,
not
but
intentional. Right.
okay, one more is the Obi-Wan Kenobi theme that he wrote, and which, okay, he's not being buried, but in a way, he's going and hiding on Tatooine. So
back to Tatooine. Yep. We can't escape it.
There you go. Another minor 6.
Another minor 6. Yeah, and one might object. Well, it is one of the default intervals in the Western scale system. So of course we're going to hear minor 6, but that particular configuration, the upbeat and then the long sustained pitch followed by a little descent in the instrumentation, and again imagery and plot points and all this is kind of reinforcing it, at least for me. And I think it's a nice touch, and it's part of, or it's facilitated by the fact that this is not overtly leitmotivic music. It's one of the rare places where, other than the Ray chimes, which is, I think, pretty crystal clear, most of this material in this cue is a little amorphous, right? You can easily read into it a great deal. And this goes back to something that you said about Ray's theme, maybe more generally, that it too, at least for the first, the antecedent phrase, large scale antecedent, it's kind of just minor triad with goes up to the fourth and descends. It's not as insistently distinctive as a lot of Williams' other themes, but that it was a masterstroke because it allowed for all these amazing pathways of development over the course of the 3 sequel movies in ways that Williams himself can't have anticipated, because no one I hold to this, no one knew that she was a Palpatine while doing episode 7. Certainly not John Williams. He said as much. He didn't know whose daughter she was. I mean, I think he was aware that it would be a mystery box situation. He wrote this theme, which can encompass all these kinds of possibilities. And I feel as though this cue is a kind of extension of that open-endedness.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I totally agree. The beauty of Ray's theme is it's easy to, because it's so easy to read anything into it, it's easy to, craft it around your own theories.
Exactly.
People can read Palpatine's theme into it. Can read all kinds of things.
All kinds of things, and they did. I remember
certainly
very clearly. Yeah, all kinds of articles. The secret of Ray's parentage is in her themes. I think it's great. I love that happened. I don't know that I don't agree with the analyses. Certainly not retrospectively, because they were all founded on the assumption that Williams knew, or anyone knew, who her parents were. But I love that it happened because people were using music and musical evidence, like in some cases very deep music theoretical tools and ways of hearing to be engaged, to have this deep relationship with the text. I'm not going to be down on that. I think that's wonderful. Yeah, it's gives people like me something to talk about, for sure. Right, well, full employment for all of us Star Wars musical theorists, right?
Yeah.
Now, there are some ways to read into her theme that are less plausible than others, and were back in the day too. But a motivated listener could probably find like Jabba the Hutt's theme in there if they really wanted, or the Ewoks. It's.
I mean, I think it would be a fun game to play, just like the bacon number, just trying to see how many steps it would take to get from one theme to another theme. I feel like that
if I change this this scale degree 2 to scale degree 3 and alter this chord and shift things over by measure, voila, it's Yoda's theme.
It's Jabba's theme, yeah. Yeah.
Could be anything.
Yeah. Okay, so now we get this part where there's no music because Ray is talking to someone.
Happens to be there.
Yeah, exactly. She's been asked Rey who. She's not looking at the sons. She's looking at Luke and Leia.
Rey Skywalker.
Yeah. How good is this shot, by the way? This BB-8 with the suns.
It's wonderful.
It's so good.
Again, one can take issues with the storytelling and the narrative choices, and especially some of the undoings, I thought, of the big swings taken by The Last Jedi. But visually, like, this is a very beautiful theme, or a beautiful film, I mean. Lots of really artfully constructed shots. And we've seen sunrises and sunsets on Tatooine before, but that was a great new way to show it to us.
Yeah. For those listening, it's basically BB-8. Like the sun and BB-8 kind of look like they're little twins. The suns are like on top of each other. It's clearly intentional. Like I think there's no way that wasn't intentional. I mean, Can I read this
quote?
Please.
Oh, so this is John Williams himself, and it's from one of those retrospective interviews he did. And this is the thing that gave me, I think, a little perspective, because part of me still really doesn't want to accept Rey Skywalker. I think just Rey. There's a poetry to that would have worked really nicely. But this is what John Williams said. So, quote, "I just think that the last couple words of the film are so completely magical. We have to have 40 years of preparation for that to get the full feeling of what that means. I felt so satisfied, so complete in a way. 9 episodes of a great tale, beautifully done over many, many years. And that means, this is the best part, and that means it's not an ending. It's here with us, and it will stay there. It makes our lives part of that story." And I just think that's so beautiful.
Aww.
And it's like, it summarizes, it's especially true, I think, for us. We're very invested in these movies, but even for a more casual viewer, it becomes part of who you are, and the music is a disproportionately important part of why this movie series is, I think, globally beloved and significant in a way that other long-running series just aren't. I mean, it has a lot to do with myth and nostalgia and all that good stuff, but there's something to be said for Williams' perspective. Maybe it's even a little naive, right? He seems to accept without fret or any sort of care for the potential objections to Rey's character arc that she absorbs the name in addition to the legacy. I mean, I get why they're doing it, but are we really going to second guess his attitude towards the scene? I mean, of all people to kind of get what this series is about on a mythical and emotional level, I'm just going to defer to him on this case. I guess what I'm saying is I am okay with Rey Skywalker.
He's been responsible for a lot of our emotional moments in the saga. So, and I feel like his lack of or his naivety, so you called. I feel like maybe that's partially why his score comes out. His scores come out so fantastically. You can't, like, this score to The Rise of Skywalker, what's remarkable about it to me is that even the kind of nostalgic, kind of the really romantic themes for friendship, and they sound so uncynical. And I feel like you have to be uncynical to be able to write those. Exactly.
Those are very sentimental, very heart on sleeve kinds of pieces, and we could, and I'm sure you have, broken down like exactly why this sounds like it's tugging on your heartstrings, down to the chord progressions and whatnot. But it's an earned sentimentality, and it's actually not naive. It takes a great deal of perspective to write that kind of music, and mean it and have it mean for other people. So I certainly don't think that these are schmaltzy or syrupy or emotionally, well, they're emotionally manipulative in the same way that all good film music is supposed to be.
Yeah.
I think he comes from a place of real investment and affection, and sort of a gut level emotional response to what these films are telling us. And he's not worried about continuity errors. He's not worried about like sort of the implications for the canon,
The lore. Yeah.
Yeah. He's certainly not. He's certainly not concerned with his own, making callbacks and cross references to everything that he himself has done. Otherwise, this score would be stuffed with prequel references, and Finn's motif wouldn't have been abandoned after Force Awakens, and we'd probably get more integration of Luke and Leia's theme and all that kind of stuff. Like, we could sort of backseat drive the score and say, well, here's where I would have put this leitmotif, and this is what I would have done with that. That's really not how he thinks.
I mean, it's so, I think his personality and his lack of being active on any sort of social media, you can tell that he's not writing for the podcasters and for the,
thank God.
And a lot of composers these days do. And sometimes it's fun and everything, but there's something so refreshing also that he doesn't. It's just different.
Yeah. Well, I know you talked with probably a couple guests, including Samantha, about Ben Solo, the sort of redeemed variant of his theme.
Yeah.
And I think it's so cute that in the interviews and the behind the scenes footage, it's almost as though Williams has to be coaxed into doing this. That it's what strike us as a very obvious music transformational strategy. It's like, do we dare? Should I do this thing to this theme? And it's like, yes, please, my God, do it. It'd be great. You don't have to rewrite a new theme. You can just reharmonize it simply in a few ways, and it'll be fantastic. And this is the kind of thing that, like you said, I think a more audience-facing or fandom-facing composer would trumpet and prepare us for and celebrate and lead discussion threads on. Him is something that I happened to do. It seems to have worked, and it may have been my idea, may have been J.J. Abrams' idea. It doesn't really matter, like where the impetus came from, but it is there, and it's effective. Not to go too far back into the score, but I think it's a really nice touch. Yeah.
I mean, I guess that is both one of my favorite things about him and also the most frustrating things about John Williams is I just wish I had more information about intent behind things.
I know. Well, and it's always been thus for his entire career. It's clear that he's a very extremely erudite and sophisticated thinker about music and very theoretically informed too, but doesn't seem to have that much interest in deeply discussing his own work. And a few occasions that you do get, it's always extremely revealing, but you are always left wanting more. We'll probably have more of a glimpse into his actual working process once his sketches and papers and things like that are made publicly available. But at this point, we can only really speculate.
Mm-hmm. Going back to these minutes, just this force theme that we get at the end, it's pretty...
Yes.
Is there anything? It feels kind of like your typical way to end a Star Wars movie.
Well,
unless I'm missing something, is there anything special about it?
Well, that's the thing. No, there isn't. And I spent all this time gushing, about Williams' instincts and how wonderful this score is. That may be. It's not unique to Rise of Skywalker, but it is something that I think it has become obligatory. So the horn solo that concludes this film is identical to the one that ends Force Awakens, and I think also maybe with a few tiny modifications, Last Jedi. And all three are adaptations of the ending of Revenge of the Sith, which concludes with the Lars family looking over with infant Luke, with a statement of the Force theme in G minor. For The Force Awakens, Williams added a little three measure tag at the conclusion of the film, to lead into the end credits for that sort of weird rotating helicopter shot that felt very un-Star Wars-y at the time. And that I feel is a little awkward. It feels a little grafted on. And that may be actually my least favorite usage, because after The Force Awakens, what had been this kind of weird, seemingly unnecessary, slightly adjusted appropriation from Episode 3's finale, as a kind of rehash of that, it then becomes simply an obligatory framing part in the same exact way, doing exactly the same thing as the main titles do. So this is a bit retcon-y, but with 4 of the 9 Skywalker Saga films now ending the film portion before the end credits, the main diegesis, with a G minor statement of the Force theme, it's just a formally necessary component of the score. Just as important, just as expected as the B-flat major main theme at the beginning. It hadn't always been that way, though, so I would have preferred that each final shot was given unique music, right? And it seemed like that was going to be the way for the first 6 movies. And we have wonderful contrasting kinds of endings for all 6 of them, but here it assumes a different function. I've kind of made peace with that, so we must close the Star Wars saga film now with Star Wars' most mythical theme, right?
Yeah, I want to hear that tag again. And that's what you're talking about, just that very...
Yeah. So it's just it's a little inelegant to me. At least it's in the right key signature, but we sort of land on the E-flat bass note prematurely, so it's not a surprise when we discharge onto for the main end credits, and it feels extraneous. But hearing it 3 times in a row after Revenge of the Sith,
was needed,
then it just becomes the default. So what are you going to do? You extend it more or change that ending? No, just leave it. It is the horn solo cue, as it's called on the cue sheet, and it is as obligatory as the main title at this point.
That's really funny because, what I'm thinking about now is, I've been part of these live Star Wars table reads this year, and so far we've done episodes 1, episodes 2, and episodes 3. And so they're all available online for free if anyone wants to watch them. But I've been providing the music for them. So just solo violin, like 80, it's been like 70, 80 cues per show where I'm just like doing, scoring the script basically. And there always is, an end credits part. So I'm thinking like, I'm just going to be able to reuse the bit of music I have for that, for the next, for the last 3.
It's
good. It's less work.
And it makes a certain amount of sense. We're sort of exiting the part of the film that is unique and entering into a more ritualized sort of space experience, in the same way that the main titles are invariant. They always give us, we know exactly how this film is formally bounded. At the beginning, we get a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away in exactly the same font with exactly the same backdrop, and the main title crawl, and the music is identical. It's a ritual, right? It's meant to situate us inside the narrative and in a kind of distancing way, as myths often do. There's a kind of remove that occurs. And I actually think that the horn solos are doing kind of something similar, which is why, to me, it's so important that we have that poetic cue, the New Home / Return to Tatooine beforehand, which is actually offering us something new, exactly. Yeah. And then with that nice sort of emotional philosophical, however you want to describe it, more kind of deep-seated closure, then we can move on to the part that
Is the
where we can leave the
obligatory.
theater. Yeah, we can either leave the theater if we're monsters, or stick around. For
Yeah, if you're a
the
monster.
stick around for the full end credits, as you must do.
Absolutely.
For the true Star Wars experience.
I think it's interesting that it's so reused in such an obligatory way in the sequel trilogy. It's almost as if they're insecure about it being read as a real Star Wars and need to make sure to put on the right outfit for it, and sort of the original sense of play, creativity is maybe lost. I mean, I think it's not, I mean, it's not, but it's sort of like the feeling of we must for it to be recognized.
It's you could say that it's elegant and fitting and needed. You could also say that it's perfunctory and lazy. I think both of those things are valid perspectives. There is maybe something also, a compensation for the loss of another really important paratext, which is the 20th Century Fox fanfare that came at the beginning of the movie and was a definite legitimizing, this is Star Wars. And without that, with the Disney trilogy, it can kind of feel, if you're being uncharitable, like this is elevated fan fiction. But no. It concludes with the Force theme, and exactly the key that you've grown to love, and exactly the instrumentation, just how you remember it. Even though that memory is manufactured, because it actually always used to be that way, right? We end with Across the Stars in episode 2, or Augie's Municipal Band, or the Ewoks' various victory celebrations, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of an invariance that is itself retconned. It's retconned to be the same thing when it actually used to be more dynamic.
Yeah.
See why? Isn't it so interesting to talk about endings? There's so much here.
There is so much. Speaking of which, I can just continue playing the credits. Okay, the John
Very
Williams
timpani
part is
forward.
coming.
Yeah, there we go.
Right here. Kind of a random spot.
All right, now we can move into the part that is not always this thing.
Yep. The first of the cast we're going to see is Carrie Fisher. Coinciding with the beginning of the friendship theme. Now a major third up.
So that little musical paragraph, it's always a question, which came first, the concert arrangement or the end credits statement of themes? Like with Duel of the Fates, that's the case. With Across the Stars, it's also, which did he write first, the concert arrangement or the end credits? And in this case, the same question, right? That statement of the friendship theme is, I want to say, basically the same, maybe exactly the same as the first presentation of it in the concert arrangement. It starts in G major and then goes to F sharp major. Without the score for both of these, and there may be slight changes of orchestration. Of course, the tempos and performance will differ, but this is what you'll hear if you listen, past the first minute of the Rise of Skywalker concert arrangement.
Oh, okay.
It's a lovely theme.
Yeah, I think it's a lovely theme as well. I do get it mixed up with Victory.
Yeah, me too.
But I like them both.
Victory's a more like, I think my first label for it was hymn.
I can see that.
It has
especially that woodwind opening.
The woodwind opening is very chorale-like, And I mean, it serves a function as a victory hymn in the movie. So it has slightly less of a like overt emotionality. It's still very emotional, but it's not quite as sentimental as the friendship theme. So that's how I differentiate them, as well as the melodic construction and harmonization. But yeah, they are very closely affiliated with one another.
Yeah, with the victory one, I find it interesting that on the soundtrack it's simply called The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. I don't know whether that's a deep decision on Williams's part or just what are you going to call it? It's
something
a lot
poignant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had the Rebellion is Reborn from Last Jedi, which is an interesting, thoughtful title that's about more than just the leitmotifs within it, which half of them we don't even know exactly what they're called. The ones that I just threw on the label Luke in Exile for lack of better description. The Rose's theme is pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. But so that does have a title that is evocative of something. And The Rise of Skywalker is evocative of something, but it's evocative of the film's title. Well, it's pure music. It's absolute music.
I guess it begs the question, what does it mean that Skywalker has risen?
Right. We have yet to exactly find out. I'll have to wait for the new Jedi Order movies if those ever are realized.
Yeah,
hopefully
if that ever happens. Uh-huh. Yeah. I'd love to see Daisy Ridley in another Star Wars.
Me too.
Yeah. Who would you want to score?
Well, I mean, Williams has walked back to his retirement. Maybe a true centenarian, whatever the word is.
Centenarian.
Centenarian, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. I can't begin to imagine.
You almost don't want to say something.
But maybe I don't. I've been impressed in different ways from all of the latter day Star Wars properties that are scored by someone other than John Williams. And some people put their own personal stamp on it. Others are shockingly adept chameleons. So like if you got Gordy Hobb, for example, to score a Star Wars movie, I would be thrilled because it would be almost as though Williams himself was doing it. And in fact, there's a few weird little moments where it's clear that Hobbs' music was what was being temp-tracked into some of Williams' scores.
Oh, funny.
Like, it's this crazy snake eating its own tail.
Yeah, Ouroboros. Yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't heard it, but apparently the new Indiana Jones game has a score by Hobb, and it's also like remarkable and, of course, perfectly in keeping with Williams's idiom from those movies. So, yeah, Hobb would be a good person if you really just want what it would have sounded like if Williams had scored another Star Wars film. And there are others that can approximate that to a greater or lesser extent. But if you had someone like John Powell or Giacchino, I think they'd be more. And now we have to specify which Giacchino, right?
Yeah.
The elder or the junior. You would hear a little bit more of a personal flair, and I think. I don't know. I like to treat these 9 movies now as that's the text, and we would want to pay homage to Williams in any future mainline Star Wars movies, but maybe it's for the best that we don't try to just certainly not train an AI or something.
I was just thinking about that. I was like, I have a horrible idea.
Yeah, no.
Hopefully they don't.
That would, if that were to happen, it would cause me to lose faith in humanity to an extent that few other things could. That would just be life disrupting and ruining for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, now we're getting into an interesting part of the soundtrack of the end credits that diverts from the soundtrack. Was that a minor 6th?
Yep. Yep. And here we go. Anthem of Evil.
Yep.
Okay, we gotta stop there.
Yeah.
So it pains me greatly that we don't hear the version that's on the soundtrack album, which has the B section, and it's a little bit less. I mean, the theme is, and I love it, but it is, in this guise, very clearly a kind of bargain basement Imperial March, or even down to the triplet minor triad. Yeah, it's well done, of course, but there is that nice middle section which occurs on the soundtrack and gives us a contrasting material that is related to, but not exactly duplicative of the. I refuse to call it Anthem of Evil. I think that's such a stupid sounding title. But I love the Psalm of the Sith, which is okay. Little digression on that leitmotif, if I might.
Please.
Just so melodically speaking, I mean, it's like the meta
visual aid.
Star Wars motif. Yeah, it's the same basic contours, the desperation and tension in Obi-Wan, all and in many other places in Williams's canon. You think of that. Back to 1997 or so is when you start seeing themes of his that have this particular intervallic structure. So it's
Which intervals specifically are you?
It's the in minor rising 1, 3, 2, 4, and then back.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, not either 2, 4, or more in this case, and more characteristically 2, 5, and then really significantly descent back down to 1. And
Or
the sort of initial statement of this, or at least the one that set the whole ball rolling, is from Jurassic Park: The Lost World, where you have what John Williams obsessives call the Ludlow motif, because it's present in a track on the soundtrack called Ludlow's Demise. If you slow it down and remove some of the note repetitions, it goes ya da 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 ba. It's a 4-note cell, right? And you can find it in other composers. It's very generic, and depends on what the composer does with it that really matters. And in the end credits variant that we hear of the Psalm of the Sith, it is channeling the Imperial March. And that comparison is made strongly, sort of inevitably, by the fact that he then follows it up with the
Imperial March.
Imperial March. So it can't help but suffer in comparison. But it has this great middle section, which is very unlike anything in the Imperial March. Admittedly, it's just a B phrase. It's not a whole bridge or development kind of section like the Imperial March has. And we don't hear it in the movie, or at least not in a way that I can discern. You can maybe contort your ear to make it out in 1 or 2 scenes, but it's really not there. And it may be one of these things where he just writes a contrasting portion of the theme for one of these extended statements that you get in the end credits, like with Rose's theme and Luke and Leia and other longer lasting, long breathed themes that get a little contrasting B section.
Yeah, I can play that.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah, so they actually in the finale track, there's the A section, the B section, and then the A section again. And I believe what they're cutting out is 40 seconds of the first A section and B section. I think they're skipping to the last A section.
Yeah,
so I'll start from everything that's cut out. Go back a little bit.
Here it comes. Yes. So
That's,
I just think it's so great.
It is. It is.
And it's very distinctive in a way that the A theme, as effective as it simply is not. I mean, it's very vagrant tonally. I mean, it doesn't stay put in one key for more than a measure or two at a time. And it's got this great melodic shape and these little submotifs, yada-da-da-da-da. It's almost lyrical, right? But totally chromatic, with big leaps and all Prokofiev-like wrong note chromaticism. And it has a gothic aspect to it, I think mostly because of the string writing. It seems sort of Dracula-esque kind of music that he wrote back in the 1970s for horror, like romantic horror movie stuff. I don't know if it fits the movie. I don't know what he was thinking. Probably just, I'm going to add some more material to this theme because, hey, I have the space to do it in the end credits, which he apparently didn't really, but...
Yeah, I'm like, if you needed to fill more space, you could have put the musicians' names in the credits.
Oh, yeah. Right. Well, especially with the way that we have end credit, the out of control expansion over the past few years. They certainly could have done that. Yeah.
Yeah. The big major seventh leaps in that they seem really like they're very striking.
Yeah.
I don't.
And in a way, I don't think that the rest of the score really corroborates, at least not in an obvious way. Well, the thing that about this Anthem of Evil / Psalm of the Sith theme, one of the reasons that I prefer the Psalm of the Sith title is because we don't hear it that much, but the few places that we do where it's a little bit more furtive and conceals, not Erzat's Imperial March, but rather something kind of Palpatine-esque, insinuating
or insidious.
And corrupting. Yeah, exactly. Those are the more interesting instances of it for me. And the version of it that is the most wonderful and most psalm-like is the a cappella choral version, which we don't hear at any point in the movie.
Right.
And that really, then it brings in these religioso connotations and the dark, tempting side of the Sith, the association of voices with the dark side, which goes back to Palpatine's theme. There's connections to Revenge of the Sith and the opera scene. I think it's really interesting, effective kind of musical topical stew that theme can indulge in. And at its best, which I think probably would be the scene in which Kylo Ren tells Rey that she's a Palpatine, and then later the scene when Rey is approaching Palpatine's throne, where you hear the Anthem of Evil, Psalm of the Sith, but in a really creepy, slow, and menacing Gothic way rather than militaristic and not quite Imperial March way. Those are really great scoring and something that's kind of one of the standout elements of this score, I feel.
I've actually been surprised throughout going through this movie 5 minutes at a time how many times the Psalm of the Sith worms its way in.
Yeah, that's what it does. It worms its way in, and it's not always the same either. Like there's that almost canon-like figure, also from the approaching the Sith altar or whatever you want to call it.
Toward the end, or
that's not exactly it. And it's not exactly a canon either, or if it is, it's a very simplistic one. But it's part of a style topic that Williams has used earlier in Star Wars. And that music, like so much of it, we don't even know really what scene it was originally intended for. I think that one comes from the beginning of the movie, but then was reappropriated to the Sith throne stuff. So it's a big mess. But the music is deployed, I think, pretty effectively in those cases where you get the Psalm of the Sith is more of a temptation kind of music rather than a Star Destroyers and Red Stormtroopers kind of music.
Anthem of Evil, that sounds more like a title that fits the Knights of Ren or something. Like that really want to broadcast.
Yeah, right, which is what they do on a couple occasions.
Certainly. Do you think, I guess I'll play some from Anthem of Evil with the voices. I like this part.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you think this was originally intended to be placed in the movie, or do you think Williams just wanted to record a concert?
I really can't. I think he knew that he was going to get the LA what's the
Master
name
Chorale.
of the Master Chorale, and
Like, I'm going to write them something.
Write them something, and something that won't take too long to perform, and that is nicely shows off in very moody and evocative this theme that I wrote, and that could be grafted into some kind of concert like suite on the album. And it's not obvious to me where in the movie it would have fit, but we could change some scenes very profoundly in terms of their affect by having that instead of Palpatine's theme or Sith.
Yeah, I'm thinking in the
Type
Sith
music.
auditorium with the disciples. It would have been interesting to see a more direct contrast with the religion, the light side religion and the dark side.
Well, that we would have gotten if they hadn't so radically changed the nature of the film, because Williams did write and had performed with the singers a large number of diegetic and pseudo-diegetic choral pieces in Sanskrit, and some of them strongly channeling Duel of the Fates. That was the plan, and that was stuff that was written and recorded. So if we ever get like the full chronological, well, not chronological, but complete, I want it too.
I want it.
It was a really significant part of Williams's vision for what the score was going to be about. It was going to be much more choral and a lot more sort of Phantom Menace style Sith Sanskrit music, but that entirely hit the cutting room floor, and the most that we're left with is that big, I think is it B minor, the big choral chord at the end of the approaching the throne
approaching
sequence.
the throne.
Yeah,
I think so.
Which
Yeah,
it's great, but I mean that's
yeah.
kind of not much consolation when you know that there was, I think, at least 10, 15 minutes worth of choral music, a cappella choral music with percussion too. There's a couple of cues that have like
Interesting.
real scary, frightening percussion music for those Sith disciples too. How cool that have been, but can only imagine at this point.
I think Rey, toward the end of the film, when she is in the Sith auditorium and approaching her grandfather at the throne, I think there are multiple ways to interpret what's going on in her mind, since she's not speaking the whole time until she clarifies, like, I'm not here to kill you. I'm here, whatever. I'm a Jedi. I'm not here to do the Sith thing. I feel like, judging from her face and just her affect, I believe that part of her is having to resist this, because I get the sense that the environment that she's in, just the sensory, like everything about what she's seeing, what she's hearing, how it feels, probably feels somewhat seductive, especially since she's kind of had moments where she's afraid of her own darkness. But I think to be afraid of it, she has to have had tasted a little too much of it, more than she's comfortable with. And I think adding in something that is like a more religious experience, like musically, would have supported that read much more.
I so strongly agree with that. And it would have been a very nice rhyme with the temptation scene in Revenge of the Sith in the Opera House, which is probably the closest analog, I think, to that a cappella, quiet, canticle kind of music at the beginning of that track. It's very brief. And this is, I make a big deal about it in chapter 7 of my book, but this little micro hymn that occurs as Palpatine tells Anakin about Darth Plagueis and how he was able to cheat death and whatnot. It's an unusual, harmonically unusual, something that stands out within this otherwise very sinister sounding cue, which is interesting in all kinds of reasons. And it's the most similar music beyond orchestration, right? That's just for strings, but here we're hearing choir. But this is a dark piece of religious music, right down to a very traditional, almost over-determined cadence, a perfect authentic cadence at the conclusion. Like where do we hear those elsewhere in the score? Like maybe one or two a score. It's
Right.
It's archaic and holy, right? But in an evil way, but effectively tempting, potentially tempting to someone like Ray, who is, we've been seeing has been in search of meaning and security and purpose her whole life, to get this music that kind of offers it to her. That would have been wonderful. I do think the approaching the throne and all the Ray and Ben on Exegol music is quite good. But that would have also really elevated the scene, I think.
Yeah, I just realized that what we do get with the bass, the dung dung, and then da 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 da. I guess it maybe evoking the Psalm of the Sith with that 1-3-2. Maybe.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me that all of the different versions, or all the possibilities for that scene, in some way or another channel that theme. But I love this idea of having something less horror music and more kind of a satanic temptation, twisted church music, which is essentially what the opening of that track is doing, even though it's wordless.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bring us into the mindset of Rey. And also, I think even in Revenge of the Sith, a lot of people have trouble believing Anakin's turn.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a struggle that I have personally with that movie. I think his turn is believable. He has a motive. He has motivations. He has motive for believing Palpatine and everything. But Rey seems like such a good, pure character. Mm-hmm. It can maybe be harder to believe that she's tempted,
and it's externalized,
or in danger.
Yeah, that's right. It rather than seeing it as a kind of internal struggle, we see that she's clearly pained about it and does not like the fact that she's within this genetic lineage. But the clearest example of her kind of confronting it is with a literal apparition of a dark Rey. It's not really internal. It's manifesting it because of, I guess, the residual dark side energy of this strange nonsense geometry of the Emperor's throne room, where there's a side chamber that could not possibly have existed in the set design from the original Return of the Jedi. But back there lurks your shadow, right? The Jungian shadow or something. Well, yeah, but she's not working through it really. And we don't get that much darkened Rey. Admittedly, there are a few moments where Williams does twist that theme and put it through some darker harmonizations, including in the approaching the throne cue. But it's not as though it's like reharmonized with the Emperor's progression, or inverted, or it's played backwards, like some satanic message. It's that theme pretty much retains its resolve throughout the entire 3-movie series, and it gets more mature as it goes, but it doesn't. There isn't a kind of dialectic, right? It's not confronting some darker version of itself.
Right. I think one of the hints of, I think it's maybe one of the only ones where I thought, oh, this might be intentional, in the movie, where Rey is telling Finn, no one really knows me. Mm-hmm. We do get a very demure sounding Palpatine theme. Mm-hmm. Like on woodwinds, like upper woodwinds or something. And it's like, oh, that's weird. And then about an hour later in the film, we get Rey's theme very low. Mm-hmm. And other than that...
Yeah. The music when she's approaching Exegol also has... this.
I think
that
that's
kind
what
of
I'm
charging.
I think that's what I'm talking
ostinato.
about, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, bum bum bum
Yeah.
bum bum bum, and it's chromaticized too. Yeah, and that continues. There are versions like that concealed in various places in the exegol scenes, but it's not her thematic arc. I don't really think.
Right.
The thematic arc for Rey is really just becoming ever more resolute and heroic and mature.
Okay, we have to do it. We have to get to the Imperial March now.
Yeah.
Technically, the minutes end there, but why do we have that here? Why, what are we doing?
Well, so of the three, this is purely speculation, but of the three sequel movies, the Imperial March plays the biggest role in Episode 9, which is to say it has more than one or two very needle drop and uninvolved iterations. Like there's the really terrific version that occurs with the reveal of the old Death Star. That feels as though Williams is doing something very, I don't want to say new, but he's having
And you don't
a lot
mean
of fun.
the Vader death scene part.
No.
Okay.
That is, well, it's very interesting how it works musically, because it's recompiled, right? He's taking, or not him, but whoever
did
the
that.
music editor, picking bits of the Vader's theme or the Vader's death and reshuffling it. It makes for I think really interesting, refracted version of that cue. But in this case, like there are a few original and strong instances of Vader's theme in this movie. So yeah, it's part of the thematic identity of Rise of Skywalker, and maybe we can slot it in there in the end credits. But yes, it's otherwise. I think it's just because Williams wanted one more go at this theme, or thought that it would be a crowd pleaser. Who knows? I mean, it's literally just the Imperial March from the concert arrangement, right? It's someone cut that out of the signature edition score and probably just like taped it into the conductor's score and had copyists make parts from it. It's unaltered. It's always nice to hear, I suppose. I think it has the negative effect of making the preceding Psalm of the Sith / Anthem of Evil section kind of pale in comparison, because nothing could live up to that theme.
Yeah.
It's also the performance is it's a little hectic, sloppy. I don't know. It's not the tightest.
Of the Anthem of Evil, or of the...
Oh, no, the Imperial March, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It's all over the place, yeah. It certainly has a kind of energy to it, but the percussion in particular, like I think that
that's...
symphony, Don Williams, he's just going wild there.
That was a funny one. I feel like one of them was like out of time.
Yeah, it's a little bit not tight, but I think enthusiasm more than compensates for rigor in that particular performance. Yeah, so another thing that's probably relevant to the usage of the Imperial March here is that they also re-recorded Duel of the Fates for this movie during the recording sessions. And I remember when this information first came out, people were wondering, was Duel of the Fates, the theme, the ostinato, all the different components, was this actually going to be integrated into the score proper in some way? And this was very much teased with one of the trailers or TV spots for the movie, which literally just had a trailerese version of the Duel of the Fates theme there. Of course, Duel of the Fates is not present in the score. At most, it was present in some of those unused choral quasi-diegetic cues. Certainly, the Sanskrit element was there, and I think a lot of the language was actually just the same Kora, Matama, et cetera,
yeah.
from Phantom Menace. Yeah. But I think that they did record the Duel of the Fates for potential usage in an end credits suite, sort of in the same way that we're hearing Imperial March. But maybe a sense of consistency prevailed, and they decided, well, we can't really put Duel of the Fates in the end credits. People are going to wonder why it wasn't in the movie. With Imperial March, at least, we had a couple scenes where the Imperial March played, but here is literally just greatest hits of the Star Wars saga.
But
doesn't really cohere.
This is also the cap of 9 films, so I could see them also trying to use themes from all the movies, except not the prequels, I guess. But
it would have made sense, but it would have made even more sense if it had also, if J.J. Abrams or whoever is in a position to remind Williams, because I don't think that Williams would have made that kind of suggestion. Yeah. To recall the great epic cathedral music of episode 1 and thereby stitch together the entire trilogy, or trilogy of trilogies, I should say. It would have been the most natural theme to recall. But it didn't happen, so, at least this way we don't have some inexplicable quotation that doesn't go anywhere, kind of like the mystery motif that occurs when Rey and
when Zori and Poe are talking.
I have to believe that was just temp tracking.
That one is really funny because it goes on for so long. Goes on for so long, so it just keeps modulating.
I know, and it's not literally the same as the music from Attack of the Clones.
Right.
It's very close, but it's clearly Williams redid it. Right, he didn't just copy and paste measures from a previous score. Another instance, again, this is very frustrating that we can't hear it, but one of the early passes for the movie started with not with a big statement of Kylo Ren's theme. You know how the movie begins on
Mustafar.
We can glean as Mustafar. Yeah. It actually started with a paraphrase of the, what's it called? Padme's Ruminations from
Really?
Revenge of the Sith. Yeah, that long, the static, creepy music with a vocalese on top of it. That was the original introduction to Kylo Ren in Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if it was recorded. It may have been a very early draft. The amount of knowledge that I'm privy to is very frustratingly limited, but that is one thing that I have had at least partially confirmed, that Padme's Ruminations would have been in some possible version of this movie heard again.
Interesting. That is such an odd spot of the.
It's an odd spot. We could have had fun interpreting it, though.
Yeah. It's just occurring to me that Padme is his grandmother, and that's kind of a weird sudden shock.
Very weird thing to think about.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, wait. Where were we? Okay. Oh, right. We were just doing the Imperial March. That's right. Okay. How at peace are you with some of the more controversial musical choices, particularly the choices during the celebration on Age and Class? Like in Reunion, like Yoda's theme. I don't know that these are controversial. I don't.
Yeah.
But Yoda's theme and Luke and Leia.
Let's see, I have a little thing written about this. Would it be too gauche to just read a paragraph from a draft?
No, please do. This is an exclusive preview.
I guess this is a scoop here. I've never shared any of this yet with anyone other than the editors. Okay, so this is from chapter 3, which is about Williams's use of leitmotif and how leitmotif works almost as a language in these movies. There are a lot of comparisons with linguistics, and one of the comparisons I have is between the semantic meaning of a theme and the emotional meaning. So I use this cue to tease that distinction apart. So the sharpest example of the tension between leitmotific semantics and sentiment occurs during the celebration that follows the Battle of Exegol. Williams envisioned the accompanying cue, tellingly entitled Bows or Bows, I don't know how to pronounce that, as an opportunity for a mini suite of light side themes from the original and sequel trilogies. In itself, this is not unprecedented. The final film in the prequel trilogy, Revenge of the Sith, bore a similarly summational cascade of leitmotifs for its long and dialogue-free concluding sequence, chaining together the funeral, Vader, Force, Leia, and Luke motifs in succession. Episode 9's Bows, a formal synopsis of which is given in Example 3, takes that sweet building impulse several leaps further. We hear, in succession, full statements of the following: Luke, Force, Poe, Yoda, Rey, Luke and Leia, and friendship themes, plus a rousing but athematic introduction and a transitional module that strongly suggests the Rebel fanfare. The version of the cue that appears in the final film excises all of Poe's themes, sadly, in the first half of Yoda's, though these sections are preserved in the soundtrack. As far as denotations go, all the sequel-era themes make sense in the cue, as does Luke, insofar as it doubles as the series' main theme, as well as the Force theme. But two stand out as being puzzlingly out of place. Neither Yoda nor the Skywalker twins are present in the scene, nor particularly on the minds of the victors who are being shown during their respective musical modules. Is Williams misleading the audience here, as one widely viewed critical video essay contends on YouTube? And then I go on to talk about, this is in itself not that, I don't want to read, there's a whole additional paragraph to go here that kind of, it doesn't justify it, but explains why it's still effective music on a certain level. One of the reasons is that there are occasions where Williams plays very loose with his leitmotific labels. Leia's theme.
Like Leia during Ben's death.
Exactly. Yoda's theme in various places on Bespin. And more to the point that themes associated with the light side, they can kind of migrate around semantically in a way that maybe fits certain storytelling choices of the series more globally. As a sort of the sentimental themes can float around, and that somehow better produces this mythic feeling of vagueness. And I can read this one last thing. Moreover, their selection operates on a metatextual level as a final farewell to melodies that the composer was especially fond of, Yoda and Luke and Leia. We know this from the fact that he programs them a lot and just seems to appreciate them.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the extent to which I'm able to justify it. It works on an emotional level and a mythic level. It does not work if you're trying to map thematic, associations in a rigidly semantic way onto what's happening on screen. Not only are Yoda and Luke and Leia not present, but like Luke and Leia's theme while Lando and Janna are talking.
Family.
It's yeah, I suppose. There's a squickiness to that scene that I don't think that the theme helps that much. I don't really care, though, because at the end of the day, I don't think that most listeners are really actively attending to the leitmotivic labels as they come, right? You're going to be invested in the story, ideally. It's perfectly okay, and I think a very valid way to enjoy these movies by being score first and really listening to detail. But that's not what Williams is really writing for. And that sequence, the tone of the music is right, the intent of the music is right, sort of within the larger scheme of things, saying goodbye to these themes. It all feels right. The music feels right. Just don't think about it too much.
Yeah. Do you ever worry that people are perhaps taking your catalog too seriously?
Yeah, I guess. I guess that would be overridden by the happiness that I feel that anyone is making use of it at all, right? A leitmotif catalog.
Right.
Okay. I mean, this is, I started that thing just as a personal guide. It was barely a page. It's like a spreadsheet. But clearly there's some interest in it, so that's okay. And I think I don't know how carefully you have to read it, but there are definitely places in that catalog where I say, don't, these labels are impositions, and it's always going to be a little bit less clear cut than a name will suggest. You got to go with that. I can see someone doing making use of the catalog that perhaps doesn't quite get that leitmotifs are not literal rigid designators. Never have been. You can't control how
Of
things
course.
are. Yeah. So
But I bet
whatever.
naming
People are
them
using-
must feel like a lot of responsibility. No.
Oh, yeah. Well, what would have been really interesting, and I guess thankfully this never happened, but if there was some sort of feedback where I come up with a name that may be inaccurate, but then subsequent composers, not Williams necessarily, but other Star Wars composers, make use of it in specifically that way. So, like, if I had, called Kylo Ren's first theme, the Knights of Ren theme, made a misattribution, and then like the Lego special or a video game would have gotten the completely wrong theme because of that. That would have been fascinating to me.
I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Just like like an editor, a well-meaning editor could tempt,
yeah. And on the cue sheets for these movies do kind of mechanically list the leitmotifs for the purpose of showing what proportion of music is thematic versus non-thematic. I think probably for award seasons purposes where you need to have a certain proportion of
new stuff,
new material. So definitely there are places like I can say that what used to be called the Rebel Fanfare now, at least as far as the cue sheets are concerned, is called the Millennium Falcon theme. So it's not that far away from a Rebel Fanfare, but it definitely has changed its denotation. If someone involved in describing these, it's probably not Williams himself, but someone is calling this the Millennium Falcon theme. Okay.
Yeah.
Then why does it occur during the Rebel blockade runner scene at the beginning of that? It's because leitmotifs don't work that way. But
and then what do you think of Luke raising the X-Wing?
I'm okay with that. I think if
They clearly
there are
re-recorded
objections-
it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's very well led into and exited. It's nicely integrated into the key. It feels like it's building up to that. If I have an objection, it's more to the scene itself rather than the use of the music, which seems like a no-brainer. I suppose it could have been reworked slightly, but if you're going for really just a naked callback, why not have a naked reuse of the cue from that movie? If it had been,
It's much slower. When I was doing that,
you did a time
I did like a
comparison.
comparison, and it's much slower in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I don't particularly mind the musical cue, and it comes at the end of a really nice longer span of original music, so it feels musically justified. I don't know if I would go so far as to say inevitable or earned, but it does feel fitting. I don't know what. Here's me thinking like someone very much not in John Williams' mentality. What are the lore implications that a Force ghost can use the Force to manipulate objects in the real world? Like, what profound implications does that have? He doesn't care. It's like, oh, I sort of remember scoring this film 35 years ago, and there's a really striking apotheosis of Yoda's theme. Let's just do it again. And it works. And he used music that transitions into it really nicely, and there's a cute little tag at the conclusion that feels appropriate. So, yeah, that doesn't really concern me too much.
Did you notice?
I can see why it would rub other people the wrong way, but not me.
I liked it personally. But did you okay, there's this one part of the movie where the guests that I had on were commenting that it sounded like the music was like oddly romantic, like more romantic than one would think. And it's like when Rey's having a flashback, or Rey is touching the helmet, I believe, or the dagger, and she sees like a flashback of her parents leaving on Jakku, and we get this like very romantic sounding bit of music. And then I realized that was the same music as right before Ben and Rey kiss. I feel like if I don't know for sure, but if I had to guess, I would think that the music was written for the latter, and then maybe.
Do you have that moment? I'm moving through my mental Rolodex of Rise of Skywalker music, and I can remember the kiss music very clearly, but I'm not associating that with dagger touching music.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it. So first, just for the benefit of listeners as
I got
well.
it. Yeah.
Oh, you do know.
I have it in my ear.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it's a sort of surge right before the grand pause. And it's slightly. It's not identical.
It starts differently, but then it morphs into that.
Yeah. So it's not. I suppose I could figure this out, since you could look at the cue sheet and see which bits are spliced from where. I mean, the score is just the craziest hodgepodge of tracked moment. Like, some of the cues are actually 30 different cues all spliced together, 1 second from here and 1 second from there. So it's quite possible that they had the original buildup and then needed some emotive stinger of some sort. It's like, well, what's the biggest emotive stinger that we have in the movies? When they kiss, so we'll use that. It is odd, actually, now that I think of it, that particular moment.
Yeah,
a little more.
It's just funny, and that like I didn't even think. Yeah, I mean, I think it was just worthy of.
I can point to the exact moment here. Is this a sheet
Oh,
music?
nice! I need to get that.
Striking chord. Yeah, is this a great resource here? Where is it? It's in Farewell, and it is this chord right here. This da 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 surge, and then little pause. Yeah. So what are we looking at? Yes, it's like a G
that would have
flat
helped me when
augmented
doing
over
this.
E flat minor. Oh yeah,
yeah, that's
Yep.
There you go.
On the exact same page there. Yeah.
Yeah.
An interesting chord, but for
truly
kiss as well as for a Force vision, but
but even like people who aren't like living and breathing music every day, it struck them as odd.
Yeah.
So I don't. Yeah. But anyway,
I don't know. It's one of the many confounding results of a score that is tracked beyond recognition in some cues. I think a lot of the stuff that takes place in Rey's bedchamber is, a bit from here, a bit from there, a bit from here, a bit from there, and maybe not all the transitions are that obviously seamless, but yeah.
You've mentioned Poe's theme a couple times. Did Poe's theme originally undergo more?
I don't know. That doesn't mean that there aren't additional variants that are unheard besides the one that is in the reunion cue. I mean, it does. It
shows up a little bit.
It has some showcases, like a little thematic payoff during the battle of the Resistance, where you get the nice galloping. I think that made it into the film version.
I think it did. But it's
I'm
also
beginning to doubt myself.
It's also on Kefbir when Finn, when they're talking to Janna, when Finn and Poe are just talking to Janna.
Yeah, this is like a more low-key, slightly heroic, slightly dubious version of his theme. Yeah.
This was kind of recent in the span of these minutes, but when Ben dies or becomes one of the Force, that sort of mournful brass chorale, which reminds me of the brass chorale in The Last Jedi with Leia looking out the window, hyperspace is happening.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, what-
That could be, I don't know. It may be Williams writes a certain kind of pensive,
Yeah.
low brass chorale.
Yeah. I've been wondering
various-
throughout this movie, like, what is it? Because there's been another spot, too, where there's like a low brass chorale, and I've been like, I just...
I always welcome it. It's a wonderful sound, and
Yeah.
it's not a
Is it a
particularly...
Williams... Is it like a common thing that he does in other movies?
I think it's a Williamsism, but not in the original or prequel trilogy.
Right.
Well, no, there's a few examples in the prequels. Phantom Menace in particular. There's some nice brief chorale brass stuff, but not in the originals.
Right.
Really at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a sound that he likes and probably started developing, not for sci-fi or action movies, but more historical and Americana type movies.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, is it in
You
Lincoln?
hear it more there.
Wait, no. Is it in... Did he do Lincoln? No.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he did Lincoln.
There are plenty of brass chorales stirring and patriotic brass chorales
Yeah,
in Lincoln.
and trumpet solos.
Yeah, and trumpet solos, but going further back to Saving Private Ryan and JFK and even earlier scores back when he was doing westerns all the time. And that's where you can hear it. I don't think that these particular Rise of Skywalker chorales sound as though they could have come out of Monument Valley in the Old West or something, but they do have it's a similar arsenal of musical tricks and affects.
Yeah. It's very striking when it comes up in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah. I love it. I love hearing these brass chorales. It's just
Me too.
As far as this warm timbral bath, it always makes me feel good.
They just work so well.
Yeah, they do.
And they're voiced really nicely.
Yeah. Even the one after the kiss, which has a very unusual dissonance underneath, at least for the first or second chord, but the instruments just make it work. It's a way of garbing harmonic progressions that just makes everything taste better. It's like the MSG of orchestration. Give it to a brass chorale.
Yeah, I mean, the timbre of the instrument, it's like swathes you in just a very nice, warm, velvety sound. Mm-hmm. Switching gears, you are writing a book, which you have read from, called The Skywalker Symphonies, Musical Storytelling in Star Wars. Is that still the title?
Yes.
Okay. So, two-part question is, one, what makes something a symphony or symphonic? And two, in what way is the Star Wars Skywalker Saga symphonically scored?
Yeah. Well, geez, do you have another hour to talk? This is, I don't think that I would even make that claim had it not been for the fact that a huge amount of the way that film music history is told nowadays revolves around this notion of the symphonic revival that occurred in the 1970s that was heralded by or brought about by or spearheaded by John Williams, and first with Jaws, but more importantly with Star Wars, right? And
so
that is
do
the
you mean
label, symphonic.
Does that label refer to like a symphony orchestra or symphony the form?
Here's the thing. So it is a very flexible signifier, symphonic, or symphonism. And it means a million different things to a million different people, and the agendas that people have for describing something as symphonic differ. Most basically, I think it is a matter of orchestration. The fact that you are using a symphony orchestra. And that may seem like it goes without saying, but actually it was a noteworthy choice in the mid-1970s to score something using one of these big symphony orchestras. And in this particular case, the London Symphony Orchestra. None of this is to say that the orchestral scores had been completely defunct. Actually, that's a gross oversimplification, but it's not an overstatement to say that Williams's Star Wars scores were genuinely watersheds in restoring the prestige and interest in a prior approach to film scoring that had kind of gone out of fashion for a couple. Geez, I was about to say semesters. This is how I'm still. Yeah, it had been whole academic years before the orchestra had made a revival. But I think that's also the kind of least interesting way of treating these works as symphonic, because there's ideas of symphonic reception or symphonic structure where there's actually deeper connections and more interesting, maybe more provocative ones too. I mean, these are not symphonies. They,
Yeah.
that I hope goes without saying, and my title notwithstanding. I mean, I meant to make that provocative claim, but they're not things that are in the genre of symphony, and they don't adhere to any of the formal or stylistic expectations of them. But they kind of do as well, right? So they're long and thoroughly developed pieces that I can't say demand attention, because these are film scores. So they're subordinate. That's how they're supposed to be functioning. But like a good symphony, they really repay hearing closely and rehearing. That's actually one of the main attitudes I think is part of the symphonic genre, is that you don't get it all upon the first hearing. You really need to revisit it. And the Star Wars scores kind of encourage that anyway, because they're all about repetition and reinterpretation of their own materials. And that's another thing, like this idea of cyclicality and recapitulation. It helps that there are 9 of them, so that's an important number for symphonically minded people. I think that's just scratching the surface of the various attributes that I think could mean symphonic to various listeners, but there's also the play between how well it stands on its own versus whether it's connected to the external world extra musically somehow. And this is, there are debates that persist across all of the history of the symphony as to extra musical, programmatic elements, whether themes should be, restricted to a single movement, how we position these movements, how we listen to them. Are they just abstract music, or are we allowed to imagine while listening to them? How does a soundtrack album, is it similar to a Beethoven or Dvorak symphony on disc? And there's this wonderful scholar, Peter Franklin, musicologist, who's written a few books on mostly late romantic music, but some really interesting stuff on film music as well. And he noticed something I think was really interesting, that after Wagner in the 19th century, the symphony kind of changed as a genre, at least in some people's reception, where, so the symphonies started to resemble these big dramatic texts with thematic recall and stories being told and a lot more overt programmaticism. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, they became accessible in a way to an audience because they enabled that very imaginative, maybe narrative-driven experience where you're closing your eyes and not focusing so much on, we just heard the subordinate theme and now we're going to get to the expositional closure and a closing group and can move into the first module of the development section. No. After that point, and arguably before it too, because everyone... for evocative music, sometimes you just can't help but have images and imaginative stories that attend to it. But there was a kind of license that was granted to the symphony after Wagner. And this is like in a very continuous line with Hollywood film scoring, right? Which is post-Wagnerian and especially post-Wagnerian symphonic styles, and Strauss and French cyclical composers, and there are other influences, of course, too, but all this is sort of filtering into, it's not just one thing, the idea of a symphony or symphonic listening to Star Wars. It's some hybrid cinematic, cine-symphonic kind of way of accessing this stuff.
So then here is maybe a weirder question, because maybe it will force you to hang your hat on something that you haven't named. Okay, so the Skywalker Saga has 3 distinct trilogies. Would you say that they're all relatively the same level of symphonicness?
No, but maybe they realize it in different ways. So the original trilogy, there's always this problem of like periodization, early, late, middle, tragic Beethoven, early Beethoven. That can easily be mapped onto these Star Wars films too. So in a way, like the trilogy of trilogies is convenient, but it's not always that revealing. But so with the sequels, for example, I think that they're a lot more rigorous in their use of leitmotifs than the prequels, which are considerably spare in terms of the number of recurring, meaningful themes per movie. It kind of depends on what you're willing to admit into the leitmotif category.
Certainly.
But I think it's clear, like, in Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, 25 or so different recurring themes at some point. It's more systematic and more retrospectively involved than the prequel trilogy. And that changes the sound, and that gives it a kind of consistency across the three movies that maybe the prequels, which are more idiosyncratic, like Phantom Menace doesn't really sound like Attack of the Clones, doesn't really sound like Revenge of the Sith. Those are more independent works, whereas the sequels, it feels as though this is almost like one big three-movement work that is very thematically stitched together, with a few exceptions. Rose's theme doesn't carry over into Rise of Skywalker example, but the basic thread is still there in a way that it's not in the prequels. Like what happened to Anakin's theme, for example, or Duel of the Fates for that matter. The prequels are like totally different entities, and I don't even know what to say about the original trilogy in those terms because they didn't have the benefit of, you couldn't compare them with another grouping of scores, really. They're sui generis.
Yeah, I guess the original trilogy had more long set pieces, or...
Oh, sure, yeah. The way that Williams organizes musical time does change quite dramatically over the course of each of the three trilogies, and there's all kinds of reasons for that too. That differences in film editing and sensibility, and Williams' own evolving style.
Yeah, and just change. Yeah, I feel like in many ways, and this is just sort of obvious, like the way that a film is scored kind of reveals changes in the filmmaking process.
Yeah.
Which he's lived through a tremendous...
he's been there for many different eras of filmmaking, technology, and style. And certainly, I think the biggest change occurs between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace, the advent of digital editing and CGI, and that plus still all very recognizably John Williams, but his idiom does shift, from 1983 to 1999 in some really profound ways. So that's audible too. But you could kind of interpret the changes in Hollywood by just listening to the music between these two trilogies.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I look forward to the next film that I'm doing is Return of the Jedi and then Phantom Menace. So it'll be a fun contrast.
That's going to be really interesting. Oh my gosh.
We'll have much more to talk about then. Is there anything else about Rise of Skywalker, this set of minutes that you didn't get a chance to say?
Well, I don't think that we can exhaust that score. I don't think that a whole... how many episodes have we gotten at this point for Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah, this is the 27th out of 29.
27, yeah. So even across that span, I don't think that we could exhaust all the interesting things to say about this score.
Oh, certainly not.
Yeah. there's more to say, but yeah, but
yeah,
I think the fact that we were able to get this much out of that
this
little
very small piece of music.
very small piece of music, yeah, it's telling.
Yeah, agreed. Well, then I'll run down the musical themes. In the set of minutes, we hear Rey's B phrase theme, possibly. Chimes.
Right?
Yeah, I'll count it. The Force theme, main theme A section, Rebel fanfare. These are just parts of the main theme in the end credits. Descending heroic tetrachords, heroic determination, friendship, Psalm of the Sith, only the A section, and Imperial March. And then in the soundtrack, this is A New Home and Finale. If you have the For Your Consideration soundtrack, there's also a track called A New Home. And you can hear the music on there too. Well, the last thing to do is the Star Wars Music Minute Questionnaire.
Yes.
Are you ready?
Oh, I'm so ready.
Okay. In exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
Okay. And because I have answered this question now a couple times.
Yes, this is your 4th time.
Oh my gosh. But also because of the nature of this particular segment, what I'm going to say is never-ending endings. Right? It just continues on ending. It will never... It cyclically renews itself. Musically, dramatically.
That's, yeah.
Kind of like life, right?
Yeah. Your previous answers were dissonant pedal tones, minor planing triads, vaguely remembered music, and my lifelong obsession.
Wow. It's an interesting trajectory for these comments of mine, from like really concrete to
very philosophical, poetic,
fluffy, and
the poetic ending, like you were saying.
There we go.
The poetic, never-ending ending.
My own evolving ending for this trilogy of trilogies.
Question number 2 is, what is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you want to learn more about?
I think the future of the mainline films. So, of course, I'm interested in the Mandoverse, which is, I think, such a funny name. But what...
Better than Filoniverse.
Oh, God. But what really... I guess it excites me, the prospect of something after the events of this film. Who it involves, both in terms of the characters, but also the artists who are going to be creating it, including composer. It could be all sorts of things. I would love, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to learn along with you what that sounds like when it hopefully happens.
Yeah, I'm so curious myself. I think this has always been on your mind because your previous answers are, what are we musically in store for as Star Wars moves on to the next chapters of its development?
Wow.
With the addendum, what was the actual score to episode 9 supposed to be?
Well, I am consistent, I guess.
And then you also asked, who will be the main composer for the Kenobi series, which we did find out.
Oh, well, we got that, yeah.
And then your next time you said, what was going on in the scoring of Obi-Wan Kenobi?
Oh, God. And we still don't really know that, or at least I don't have any new knowledge there. Wow.
I have some insider scoop.
Oh, gosh.
Finally, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of, besides anything Star Wars?
Yes. Well, for some reason, and I think this is probably true of my previous answers, it tends to go into TV more than movies. Yeah. So I'm a big booster of the Bear McCreary sonic style. I think he's a fantastic composer, and I have really relished the Rings of Power and season 2 of Rings of Power. It's terrific. I feel as though if you get a kick out of this kind of big orchestral, dare I say, symphonic scoring style with really great themes. I mean, he has such a great thematic imagination that he plays with and does all sorts of tricks with, and it's a very pleasure-filled listen/watch for me. Rings of Power.
That's great. There's so many. If the one thing that I think, if I had to count the answers that people give probably the most would be something Lord of the Rings related. But then when I ask the secondary question of what do you think of Rings of Power, it's so polarized.
Oh, God. Is it polarized musically? 'Cause I don't see how anyone could find his music anything other than brilliant. It's sumptuous and fantastic.
I think it might be polarized musically as well, but I think that might also just be because if you feel badly about a show or movie, it's...
Yeah. I get it. At the same time, I actually quite like the show, too, which don't...
I'm glad.
Don't come at me, but...
I haven't seen it, so I don't...
Yeah, and I'm a Tolkien nut, so I'm not one of these purists who thinks any manipulation or violation of his universe is sacrilege. I think it's really well done, and I don't know, maybe I don't have as well developed taste as some of your other.
I'm sure that's the answer.
Guests.
Previously, you've said Star Trek: The Motion Picture, Jerry Goldsmith. Yeah. You've said Severance, composed by Theodore Shapiro, which I've now...
Yes, and it's coming back.
We have a season 3. Oh, I'm so excited for the new season. Season 2? Is it season 2? I've watched season 1 twice. Really like it.
I need to do a rewatch for that.
Yeah. I watched it by myself, and then I needed to show someone else. Very good. And then you also said White Lotus.
White Lotus, yes.
Which I want to watch. So...
Yeah. That's a good show that could easily be seen as a guilty pleasure, but it's very well done.
Nice.
And musically.
I like shows that are guilty pleasures all the time. So it's fine.
Go for it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for coming on Star Wars Music Minute for the 5th time. Yeah, 5th time. You've been every season since it started.
I wonder if this is the longest appearance.
No, I don't think so.
Really?
I think Empire Strikes Back was really long.
Oh, yeah, that stands to reason.
It turns out you have a lot to say about that movie.
The whole last chapter of this book is pure Empire Strikes Back.
Nice. I'm so excited to read it. And I enjoyed your Phantom Menace article. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Oh, good.
I think it was for the anniversary. And then you talk about Anakin's theme in that.
A little retrospective. Yeah.
And then I believe you also have a book that recently came out that you edited, studying music analysis and film, studying the score.
Yeah. I don't have a copy that has the nice cover, but this is what it looks like, the sort of library cover version. And it's an edited volume, so it's a bunch of very wonderful, fine scholars.
Is that it?
Whoa, yeah, that's it. Yes.
Got it from your website.
And I'm so pleased with that stock image that we were able to
of
get
the magnifying glass with the music note.
I know. It's really silly, but I think it's a good hook for this book.
Yeah, it is. And then, of course, you still have Hollywood Harmony, which I've never actually really tried to delve into what this image is. But now, what is this?
That is Gandalf. That is from the Two Towers.
See, you can tell that I'm not Lord of the Rings savvy.
You know, the source of the image to me is almost less important than the color scheme. For some reason, I think of the style of harmony that I cover in that book as being very purple indigo, and that image has that color scheme, and the production team did that for the cover. So
that's great.
Both of your books have kind of chromaticism.
Both of your books kind of have that color scheme, I have to say. So maybe
I'm
it's
typecast.
It's
yeah. We'll see. I haven't gotten rights for a cover image yet for book number 3, but maybe I'll go with it.
Does it have a release date?
No. It has I need to get the full manuscript to the editor's date.
One of those. Yes.
But we're probably, I would say, probably a year away. The gears of publishing work, they rotate very slowly, but book's in great shape. I mean, there's not much left to write, so I can't wait to get it out.
Great interest.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I recently, I guess it's not that recent, but was reading a couple book chapters, or maybe it was just one, of Alex Ludwig's Dies Irae book. That's another fun one on the horizon.
Oh, have you seen? He has a YouTube channel that's just compilations of.
I know. I submit stuff
Infinity.
to him all the time.
Oh, you submit it?
Yeah. And there were a couple in the last Skeleton Crew episode 3.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's right. I remember hearing that. I'm watching that with my daughter, trying to get her into. It's a good like entry point into Star Wars because this is
totally
really for kids, but has good Star Wars values to it as well.
Absolutely. Well, listeners, I'll put links in the show notes to everything we've discussed, and there's 2 more episodes left this Rise of Skywalker season. I will talk to you next week for more end credits, just full-on end credits next week. That's minutes 136 through 140. And with that, have a good day/night. It's night here, and may the Force be with you.